Good morning, dear students. Today we're going to continue within the same chapter. However, we will start with a new activity which title is Blood Vessels and Dynamics of Circulation. We all know that our circulatory system is ready to respond to your needs, including oxygen gas and the nutrients. So the blood is in a continuous circulation through a network of blood vessels, and these blood vessels have different characteristics. However, how is this network of distribution organized? What are the structural differences between the different types of blood vessels? So here we're talking about structure. How can these differences allow blood vessels to play different roles? If you touch this area at the level of your wrist, you can feel a pulse. So why do we feel a pulse at the level of the wrist? And finally, why do we say that there's a double circuit for blood circulation? There are three main types of blood vessels, and they were actually mentioned in activity 1. We have the arteries, we have veins, and capillaries. We're going to watch a video that talks about the different types of blood vessels and the way they are organized, these two objectives. So if you please pay attention.
Blood vessels consist of arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. How they work. Arteries carry oxygen-rich blood away from the heart and eventually merge into smaller vessels called arterioles. The arterioles connect to capillaries, where oxygen and other nutrients pass from the blood into tissues and organs. The tissues pass carbon dioxide and other waste products into the blood here as well. This deoxygenated blood then flows from the capillaries to venules. The venules then merge into veins, which carries the blood back to the heart. And that be blood vessels.
In this video, we have seen how these blood vessels are connected and organized. We have seen that the artery branches into many arteries, smaller arteries called arterioles. And these arterioles branch into a network of tiny blood vessels called capillaries. Then these capillaries merge to form many veins, which are called, so from capillaries, forming many veins called venules, and then these venules join together in order to form veins. Here is a figure which is similar to that present in document C. It shows an artery starting with an artery and then moving to smaller arteries called arteriole. The arteriole branches into a capillary or a network of capillaries. Capillaries merge to form venule, and then the different venules will join to give a vein. It's obvious that these two blood vessels, artery and a vein, in addition to the capillary, it's obvious that they have different structures. If you examine the wall of each, you will see different structure. And this implies that they are going to play different functions, because in reality, blood vessels are another good example of how structure and function work together. Before starting with the structure and function of each type, I would like to study the variation of three variables as I move from an artery into a vein. So, this is the figure showing the way blood vessels are organized, starting with an artery till we reach a vein. And here we have a graph that includes the three variables. We have the velocity of blood, we have the blood pressure, and we have the total area of blood vessels. So let's see what will happen for the velocity as I move from a large artery till I reach the veins. Starting with the velocity, this red curve, I'll notice that the velocity is somehow constant, or we have a very slight decrease in velocity as I move from large arteries till I reach the arterioles. However, when the blood reaches the arterioles and start to move from arterioles into capillaries, there is a drop in this velocity till we reach the minimum value at the level of capillaries. As long as the blood is moving through capillaries, the value of this velocity is very low. So here we have a constant low value for the velocity. However, as the blood moves from capillaries into venules and then we reach veins, we have a significant increase in this velocity to keep a constant value as we move along veins. Despite this increase, we can notice that the velocity at the level of veins is less than that at the level of the arteries. So please keep in your mind that the velocity of blood is very low. It reaches its minimum values at the level of capillaries. Now let's move to the blood pressure, the blue curve. And just when we make a quick examination, you will notice the great difference between the blood pressure between arteries and between the veins, and the drop is actually taking place as we move from arterioles into capillaries. So yes, we have a great difference between blood pressure. The pressure is very high at the level of arteries, while it's very low at the level of veins. Keep this also in your mind if you please. Finally, let's move to the last variable, which is about the total area. And it's obvious also that the highest area is provided by capillaries. So if I check the area provided by the large arteries and the veins, the area is very low with respect to the area provided by the capillaries. And now the final point related to blood vessels is the structure and function of each type. We will start with the artery, and according to your knowledge, you can say that an artery carries the blood from the heart to all the body organs at a high speed. We have seen the speed in the previous graph. Some people say that arteries carry oxygenated blood. However, I'll say that they mainly carry oxygenated blood, because if you remember from the first activity, here we have an artery which is called the aorta. Yes, it carries oxygenated blood. So this is the aorta. However, if we move to the right side of the heart, which is specific for the deoxygenated blood, you will remember that this artery, which is called pulmonary artery, it carries deoxygenated blood into the lungs. So here there is an exception, which is about pulmonary artery. So most arteries carry oxygenated blood. However, the pulmonary artery is an exception. Now let's move to the structure of the artery. As I've said before, if we examine these two blood vessels, actually this is an artery. If I examine the wall, I'll notice that there are 3 layers. Similarly for the vein, this is a vein. However, if I check the middle layer, for example, I'll notice that this middle layer, which is made up of smooth muscle cells, is thicker in an artery than in a vein. And if I check the opening right here, I'll notice that the opening is narrow with respect to the opening present in a vein. So, concerning the structure of an artery, I say that it has a round and narrow opening. It should be narrow in order to keep the high pressure of blood. Here I have to give a note also about the round opening. Even if I make a transverse section in the artery, it keeps its round opening. Concerning the wall, it is a very thick wall in order to bear the high pressure of blood. So don't forget that the blood is pumped out of ventricles. The blood has a very high pressure, so the artery should withstand this high pressure by its thick wall. And this wall is also elastic in a way that when the blood hits the wall, we have something like a wave is going to move through this wall, and this wave can be felt at the level of your wrist, and this is called the pulse. Now let's move to veins. What about veins? And according to your knowledge, you can say that veins carry blood back to the heart. So some people say that the veins are specific for the deoxygenated blood. However, it's not the case, because if we also remember the two types of veins connected to the heart, we have the vena cava, the two vena cava. Yes, they carry the oxygenated blood. However, we have another vein which is taking the blood back from lungs to the heart. This vein, which is called pulmonary vein, it carries oxygenated blood. So in general, veins carry deoxygenated blood. However, we have an exception, which is the pulmonary vein. What about the structure of veins? Yes, one more time. Yes, it consists of 3 layers. However, the middle layer is thinner in a vein than that in an artery. The vein is unable to make any change in its diameter. It's not responsible for controlling the flow of blood. However, it's responsible to take the blood back. It should reduce the resistance against the flow of blood. And because of that, if I check the structure, I can say that the opening is wide in order to reduce the resistance of flow, because the blood has very low pressure in veins. So we have a flattened and wide opening. What about the wall? We can describe the wall as a thin wall which has these special structures which are called valves. Don't forget that the veins are taking the blood back into the heart, and sometimes they are moving the blood against gravity when the blood is coming back from the lower organs into the heart. So in order to prevent any back flow of blood, we have these special structures which are called valves. So this characteristic is specific for veins. And finally, let's move to capillaries, which are the site of exchange. So first of all, they connect arteries and veins, and we have seen this before in the organization of blood vessels. And yes, they are the site of exchange that happens between blood and cells. In order to make this exchange, the blood vessels, these blood vessels, which are capillaries, should provide a large surface area, and the flow of blood should be very slow, and we have seen this in the graph. In order to achieve this main function, which is to make gas exchange, let's examine the structure of a capillary, and we can describe the wall as a very thin wall. We have only 1 layer of cells instead of 3 as present in arteries and veins. So we have a very thin wall, and this wall is permeable just to allow gas exchange to take place. And in order for the blood to flow slowly, the diameter is very small diameter. So if you check this figure, you will notice that yes, it's very narrow. So check here, we have a red blood cell. It fits a red blood cell, an erythrocyte. This is everything about blood vessels, and now let's move to the second part of our activity, which talks about the circulation of blood.
The cardiovascular system is divided into systemic and pulmonary parts. The systemic circulation carries blood from the heart to tissues of the body and then returns it to the heart. Oxygen-rich blood is pumped from the left ventricle into the ascending aorta. The aorta then makes an inverted U-turn to form the aortic arch, which gives rise to branches that supply the head, neck, and upper limbs. The aorta continues posterior to the heart as the descending aorta, which travels through the thoracic and abdominal pelvic cavities. It supplies the organs of these cavities and the lower limbs. In the systemic capillaries, oxygen is exchanged for carbon dioxide, resulting in oxygen-poor blood. The oxygen-poor blood enters the right atrium via the superior and inferior venae cavae. The pulmonary circulation carries blood from the heart to the lungs for gas exchange and then returns it to the heart. Oxygen-poor blood is pumped from the right ventricle into the pulmonary trunk. The large pulmonary trunk divides into the right and left pulmonary arteries. These arteries transport blood to the right and left lungs. In pulmonary capillaries, carbon dioxide is exchanged for oxygen. This results in oxygen-rich blood that then flows through the 4 pulmonary veins and enters the left atrium.
So because we have 2 circulations, we can say that our blood circuit has double circulation. It's a double circulation because it includes the systemic circulation, which is a circulation that targets mainly all the body systems, and the second circulation is targeting the lungs. Because of that, we describe the circulation as, or we call it, pulmonary circulation. Starting with the systemic circulation, or the big circulation, it happens mainly between the heart and all the body organs. The objective of this circulation is to supply these body organs with oxygen gas and the nutrients, and at the same time it carries away their wastes. The blood vessels involved in this circulation are the aorta and the 2 venae cavae, the superior and inferior. Moving to the pulmonary circulation, or the small circulation, it happens mainly between the heart and the lungs. The objective of this circulation is just to make oxygenation for the blood, to get rid of carbon dioxide and water vapor, and at the same time the blood should gain oxygen gas at the level of the lungs. The 2 blood vessels involved in the circulation are the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary vein. The last point to be discussed is about the blood circulation. We describe it as a closed circulation, a closed circuit. So if we have a point right here and allow this point to move through the 2 circulations, you will notice that this point is going to move from this point and it will come back to the same point, just to prove that our circulation is a closed circulation. Just check its pathway. Aorta, going through the systemic circulation, coming back to the heart by the vena cava and to the same point. So yes, it's a closed circuit. This is everything about activity 2. Thank you for your attention.